Hello and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 3 with the Black Ice mod. And in today's episode of the UK campaign, I'm just debating whether or not I should just pull out of Italy with all these divisions here. Because I've got sort of, how many troops? About 300,000 troops that I've got locked in this grinding combat against the Germans. And I just don't think there's an easy way I'm going to be able to actually win this. And if I combine them with my Marine Corps, I've got a pretty mobile force there. I can send the armour, what I'll do is I would pull back to Sicily and use that as a, a defensive position if necessary. And I'm just going to let the Americans do this. And then what I might do is I might try for an invasion of the North African, not the North African, that's France. What are you talking about? The French coast with my Marines and things maybe. Or I could divert all those forces towards the Japanese front and plan that invasion of what is called Formosa, but actually, it's Taiwan. So I'm going to see what I can do. I'm as I say, I'm really debating that, because on the one hand, keeping my units in Italy might be all that's stopping the Germans pushing the Americans back out. But equally, I don't feel like it's my job to hold this now. I knocked Italy out, and this is just a huge amount of forces that I could use for something else. So yeah, I'm not sure on that. It's a really tough question. And the Soviets now are starting to push back, which is really positive. They've even surrounded a couple of German divisions there. That's good. But if they can take these provinces here and push into the Ukraine proper, maybe even take back, where's Kiev? Yeah, take back Kiev and things, and that would be amazing. But they're starting to reach sort of this is the dodgy terrain area, so if they get to here, the front becomes a lot easier to defend. I'm sorry, by the way, if you can hear Kingdom Hearts 3 in the background. My girlfriend is playing Kingdom Hearts 3. I don't think you'll be able to hear it, but if you can, well, it's not that bad. It's just a bit of Kingdom Hearts. Anyway, let's rock and roll. So yeah, I really am debating this. I think it might just be a good idea just to pull out. And you know what? Sometimes you just have to accept that not all of your ideas are going to pay off. And I think this is one of those situations. Because right now I just feel like I'm wasting my limited manpower. Because that is quite a low manpower pool on effectively not my fight. Right, let's get all of my units together. And let's pull back to Sicily. Go. No, you're going down here. Come on, units. I just feel like it's a waste of resources, that's all. And the quicker my units get out, the better. And then I'm just going to let the Americans handle this, because the Americans have got a lot of units in Italy now. They should, in theory, be able to at least hold the Germans in place. Right, we have managed to hold our line here. We're still locking down a huge amount of Axis troops in the far north, which I'm going to call the Petsamo Pocket. Yeah, that's a good name. But yeah, that's going to be held down. And they're probably doing a fair amount of, I imagine, convoy. Yeah, there's a bit of convoy interdiction going on here with a bunch of Soviet submarines. I don't know much about the Soviet Navy, actually, of World War II. Anyone that watched my Soviet campaign knows that I gave every single Navy officer a rifle and said, "To the front with you." Which, I mean, they performed well. At the end of the day, we did a good job of winning that campaign, so it was easier than the UK campaign's been. Well, actually, is it easier than the UK campaign's been? I feel like maybe that's a bit of an overstatement. I wouldn't say the UK campaign's been too difficult. I've just been forced back in a few areas. Right. And we are defending here against... We should win that battle. In theory. And yeah, there's you that are just sort of... Should we say struggling? Yeah, to try and get to Ambon, but Ambon has actually defended itself. I feel like we need to defend this island chain. You know, the Dutch East Indies needs to be, I think, defended, including Borneo. So I really think an invasion of this major island and this major island doesn't... This matters less, I think, the south. If we can take Clarkfield, Manila, and yeah, I think Clarkfield and Manila would be good. Yeah, so I think Manila is our major jumping off point, along with Apari and then these two ports here. So I think that's what I'm going to do with all the units that I'm going to get back. Yeah, I'm still being attacked up in Finland. But we can hold this line quite easily. We probably can't push out because of the fact that these units are just so dug in. I'm not sure. That's a tough question there. High caliber cannons, 1944. Yep, that's fine. Deep battle. We can do some deep battle techs. Artillery support is pretty good. I think we'll do that. And I quite like the idea of mechanized breakthrough. Yeah. And then we've got some supply issues just dotted around. There's a pretty sizable chunk of Japanese forces actually in the south. Theoretically... Oh, well they've got Bangkok, which would keep them supplied. If you took Bangkok, Saigon, Cam Ranh, and... yeah, that province, and maybe this one as well, you would, in theory, cut them off completely. Haiku? Let's say, I haven't had much of a chance to sort of plan what I'm doing at this next stage. I feel like I'm at a stage of this campaign where I just don't quite have the forces with which to actually sort of do what I want, if that makes sense. Pull out. Right, perfect. Right, so now that they're out the line, I can repurpose them to go somewhere else and just let the Americans handle this baggage. And then I can keep inviting people to the faction. Bolivia's joined, Colombia, Ireland. So we've got quite a decent footprint down here. I want Venezuela on board, to be honest. They're who I would like to get on board more than anyone. And 1650 isn't too bad. They are slowly joining our faction. Under a little bit of pressure here. Aha! Perfect. Well done, Navy. Another couple of long-range submarines taken out. Speaking of submarine losses... we've had precisely... Right, okay. There's a little bit of bullshit happening here. But as you can see, I have built a lot of destroyers. Let's send out some of my units just to do a little bit of seek and destroy work. Because there's one thing I don't like, it's just losing any convoys at all. Losing 5 and 4 is completely unacceptable. So let's have a look at that. Right, game's not crashed. Perfect. Now, hopefully there's no weird glitches on the audio, because I have had a couple of strange glitchy audio problems recently, and I'm not exactly sure what's causing it. It's odd. Yeah, we managed to sink some convoys. Not really important. The main thing is that we actually do some damage to them. That'll be a naval invading. Or I was expecting it to be. There's 2 random floating marine divisions outside of Borneo. And I have no idea why. Aha! Portuguese war efforts. What do they do? So, in 1941, Japan ordered the government of Macau to accept Japanese advisors. Limited military forces at Macau also disarmed, although Macau was never occupied. In 1943, during the Second War, the Portuguese dictator Antonio de Oliveira Salazar leased bases to the Azores to the British. Okay, I think if we had that event before, I'm pretty sure we have. Right, that'll be the damaged Japanese submarine. The Mighty Hood isn't under any direct threat. I haven't actually looked at the stats of the Mighty Hood. I have no idea what its weapons are like. What it's packing. Oh, a lot of 1940 and 1942 text there. And haha, the armor's done. Good, another armor division. Can't go astray. And speaking of supplies, actually, that looks like a bit of an issue. Let's pump a little bit in supply. Hopefully that'll just stop the decline. So we're getting 3. Yeah, that should sort it out. But I've watched quite a lot of UK sci-fi recently and just shows in general. I finished watching Picard and I'm still sort of coming to grips with it as a show. I just feel like it wasn't very coherent. Yeah, it's just not... It wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And I've been quite disappointed with sci-fi as a whole, to be honest, over the last few years. It's been really disappointing. Just in general. There's been a lot of... Oh, I'm going to cancel those. There's been a lot of very mediocre sci-fi shows, unfortunately, that have just been very very average. So Picard recently, as I say, was just... I'm not sure why it didn't gel with me 100%. Just from the start, something about it felt a bit off. It didn't feel very Star Trek-y. I feel like the principle of the show is a good principle. The idea behind it is fine. The execution just isn't great. There's no coherency to it. Yeah, it's just I've just got a few gripes, let's put it that way. But I think those gripes are shared with quite a lot of recent sci-fi. I think a lot of recent sci-fi has been a little bit disappointing. Just in general, it's not lived up to its expectation. So, yeah. And then Doctor Who as well. I mean, I am a really big Doctor Who nerd. I've watched a lot of the original old series of Doctor Who, and I've watched all of New Who. Every single Doctor I've watched, you know, and I can respect wanting to do different things in Doctor Who. That's sort of the point of Doctor Who. You want to try and keep it fresh and keep it interesting. Equally though, nothing in the Doctor Who episodes that came out in the UK recently really made any sense whatsoever. They were all just really bizarre episodes. It wasn't great. It was really average. It's been disappointing. to put it mildly, Doctor Who. And I feel sorry for Jodie Whittaker, to be honest. I feel like she's being let down by some really poor writing, because there are times when you watch her and you think, you know, maybe if you had some solid stories, this would actually be quite interesting. But because she's got just terrible stories, I mean, they had an episode where it was like Birdemic. I think it was Praxius or something. I can't remember the name of the episode, but it had whatever the evil thing was. It was called Praxius, and it was plastic. And they told you quite an interesting thing, actually, in the episode about global warming. I mean, I didn't realise there was giant, effectively continent, well, maybe not continent size, but, you know, huge mounds of plastic in the ocean that were just forming into big land masses almost. You know, it's an interesting thing, and if it wasn't just so heavily layered on, you know, maybe it would be more interesting. But instead it's just really hits you in the face, and you're left at the end of the episode going, why did I need to be smacked around the head with this? There are clever ways of saying a story. There were, you know, David Tennant episodes where they quite cleverly indicated that, you know, for example, one that springs to mind is the Cybermen. So the Cybermen in the latest Doctor Who series, I think, were actually played pretty well overall. I mean, there's going to be some spoilers because I'm discussing this. If you haven't watched Doctor Who, you know, there's not much to spoil. But they've brought in Cybermen that are cyber Time Lords, and they look ridiculous. But other than that, the Cybermen that there was one particular cyber person that they sent back, and his costume design, the episode is really good. It's got like a horror vibe. It's quite interesting. The cinematography is quite good in it as well. The sound is all fun. It's a fun episode. It's probably the best one of the series. But then in the finale, they just brush the Cybermen aside. They're not even really... That character that they've spent time developing in... You know, they gave this guy an episode, effectively, and a backstory and a run-up, and they've just ditched it for the Master, which... And I will admit, the Master in the new series is played pretty well. I quite like his character. I can't remember. Is it Sacha Dhawan? I think it's Sacha Dhawan. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but you know, the idea of him is quite good as well. But the execution of everything is just poor. The episode follows no framework, and they get rid of all the good stuff they've done with the Cybermen. But my point was, out of all of that, is that they had the Cybermen in the David Tennant era, that when they played a message subtly, they played it really subtly. You can tell in because the backstory of this one, it's called Age of Steel, I believe, the episode. They go to a parallel world, and the TARDIS sort of crashes there almost. And I can't remember the exact circumstances of how they get into the parallel universe, but they get into the parallel universe, and there's it's like a version of Britain where technology is slightly further ahead, and everyone has these Bluetooth things plugged into their ears, like integrated, and it's sort of a bit of a horror take on technology in the modern age, because technology is, in this world, sort of hardwired into everything we do. No one puts their phone down and things. And, I mean, it actually holds up as an episode, bar the fact that they're all holding, like, Motorola's. But the premise behind humanity's being slaved to technology, and then this person trying to combat their own sort of human mortality with technology is a really interesting idea. But... And that message is held up. Whereas in the latest episode, if you take the Praxis one, where it's a little bit about global warming and things, and plastic pollution, which is a real problem, you know, it is a real concern. But rather than hit you over the head with it, why don't you do something clever, like that episode did years ago about technology? You know, have something subtle and then sort of build into it. It all felt a little bit too on the nose for me, and I don't want to take a huge shit all over it, because I really like Doctor Who. I want Doctor Who to do well. You know, everyone ratted on Peter Capaldi and said he was shit, and I watched his episodes and I really liked them. I've watched Thick of It though, which is a really good UK show about UK politics, It's like a comedy. It's really about the Labour Party and Alistair Campbell. Is it Campbell? Oh, I can't remember his name. I'm getting two people mixed up, I think, in the British Labour Party from that time. But he's like the the communications officer that goes to all the press and spins stories and stuff. It's a really great series. I do recommend watching it. But in that, you've got Peter Capaldi swearing his head off. So the novelty of him playing the Doctor never really wore off for me. But I just really feel for Jodie Whittaker, because while Peter Capaldi had some fucking awful writing, because he truly did, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as the writing that I think Jodie Whittaker is putting up with at the moment. You know, if I was her, I would just be so disappointed with everything, really. All of the people that are behind this production, you know. And as I say, I don't want to shit over this, because I imagine people put so much hard work into coming up with these stories. Some of the set design elements are really good. Some of the cinema photography, as I mentioned, is really good. Like the episode where they're in the haunted house almost. You know, it's a good episode of Doctor Who. You know, it's not stellar by any means. It's not the greatest episode ever written, but it's a good episode of Doctor Who. It was the first time I was watching that. The first time I've watched the last two series of Doctor Who and actually been like, wow, this is a decent plot arc. Maybe something will happen that will be interesting. And no, they just ruined the Cybermen completely in the next episode and made them completely toothless. I don't know. I find it frustrating more than anything. And I think it's off the back of other issues I've had with sci-fi shows recently. I don't understand why you can't have an episodic Star Wars. You can't have episodic sci-fi anymore. Literally, Doctor Who is the only episodic sci-fi show that I know that doesn't have just a continuous overarching storyline. I don't understand what TV has against it now. And I blame shows like Lost and Game of Thrones for doing this, where everything has to be an overarching storyline. I mean, it's fine having an overarching storyline. Like, sorry, to draw my favourite show of all time, sci-fi wise, is Stargate. Stargate has an overarching storyline of the Goa'uld, who are, you know, an ever-present threat, and that, you know, every now and then they will run into them and there'll be an episode with them. But in between that, you have other episodes, like, let's say, Series 2, there's an episode with Tilk where he gets stung by a bug called Bane. And in that episode, he slowly morphs into a bug. Now, it's not the greatest episode of Stargate ever, but it's just a different episode, and it has something different going on in it. Why TV, and especially sci-fi, can't have just an episodic series where every episode is a different story? You know, a bit like, is it Black Mirror on Netflix? I can't remember the name of it. What's the name of that show? Dark Mirror? Something Mirror on Netflix. What's the name? Black Mirror, that's the name. Right, so my girlfriend coming up trumps there with the... You think? Black Mirror, right. Whatever, we're going to go with it. That show on Netflix is episodic in its framework. You know, they tell a different story, I think, in each episode. And why they can't do that for sci-fi shows now, I don't get it. You know, just... Especially when sci-fi lends itself so perfectly to it. It's not like we're watching a soap. You know, I get it in a soap. You have the same characters every week. And in a soap, you know, they have their plot threads that have to play out almost in real time for an audience. And in fantasy, it works as well because you have characters that are long-standing and you have family relationships between different groups of people. Fair enough. But in sci-fi, you can have your set characters. You can have, I don't know, your Luke Skywalker type character that's the protagonist. And then you can have his guide, which is like a Doctor-esque character, or like Daniel Jackson in Stargate or something, who is the guide of the rest of the team and works stuff out and figures out the MacGuffin that takes them to other planets or sets them on their path in the universe or something, whatever. And why... And then everyone else around that can be random. You can have a new story every episode. Now, I know it's not easy to write a new thing every episode. And one of my issues with Picard is, I feel like it could have been really good if you keep the plotline the same. Soji is Data's daughter, whatever. And she's gone on the run from the Romulans and sent some sort of cryptic message to Picard, or even have the sister still go to Picard and get blown up. Whatever, that's fine. Then from that point onwards, go on and sort of just so follow the trail. Soji has left breadcrumbs on every planet that they want to go to, or in the sort of sequence, and then on each planet there's like a mystery or something that they have to overcome to keep on tracking that character down. And the more they track that character down, the easier it gets. And I just... it's frustrating. You know, and every planet, as I say, they have a different storyline on each planet, and it all leads up, so you have your overarching pathway still, to try and hunt down Soji. But then that way you still have an individual Star Trek-esque episode where, you know, you can have away teams then that go down onto the planet. You know, you can have stupid ensigns that die immediately. You know, like in normal Star Trek, like in every episode there was random character B that would beam down to the planet and you knew he was going to be dead because he's never been introduced before, and they'd say something like, oh, he's been recently transferred. And you go, well, he's up, you know, he's going to die. But there's something about the campy stupidness of old style sci-fi shows that works. You know, in Stargate even, there were episodes where there'd be like a new character introduced and you'd go, he's going to die. But something about that works because it just puts a little bit of stakes in an episode. Whereas now, a lot of the main characters they bring in, you know they're not going to die because they're going to be in the rest of the series. You can look at the crew for the whole, you know, the actor list and go, well, none of them are going to die because they're slated to be in every episode. And you're like, well, it ruins the tension in every single thing that they do if you know that everyone's going to be alive. I just... Oh, my rant about sci-fi. I'm so sorry, everyone. I don't want to rant about sci-fi and stuff. I really do want to concentrate on trying to win World War II here. But I just... Oh, really am fed up with it. You know, it's irksome. You know, and I am, you know, a bit of a social justice warrior, to be honest. I'm happy with all the feminist things. You can chuck as many female characters at stuff as you want. I don't care as long as the storyline is good. You know, as long as the plotline makes sense and, you know, the characters are fun. I mean, Picard in the new Picard series is just so ineffectual. And what frustrates me is he could have been so good as an older person doing it, and there are moments where the old Picard is there and you're like, oh yeah, awesome, and then it's just backhanded with just some shite is the best way of putting it. Just absolute tripe. I really, as I say, I don't get it. My understanding of sci-fi trends is I'm obviously old-fashioned, you know. People don't want episodic sci-fi anymore, apparently. You know, I must be completely wrong. I mean, I've already resigned myself to the fact that I'm never going to get a good Stargate series ever again. You know, like, although everyone said that then Doctor Who would never come back, and it did, so maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but, you know, after Origins, which came out, which, I mean, does anyone even remember Origins? Stargate. I very much doubt my 200 subscribers. I doubt I've got many Stargate fans. I do recommend you watch Stargate though. It's really good. If anyone wants a pretty modern looking sci-fi show, especially Atlantis. Like, a lot of people don't like Atlantis, but I really like Atlantis. Shout out to Rodney McKay, one of the best sci-fi like scientist actors ever. He's got a YouTube channel as well, actually. D Hewlett? It's quite funny. He does videos with like his kid or something like Minecraft, and I don't know. But it's just a funny little series that he does. I think he does Stargate rewatches as well. I'm pretty sure he did like a live stream of a Stargate episode where he was rewatching it. But, you know, just a few little things like that. Could be good. As I say, I'm a bit of a sci-fi geek, and there isn't a lot of sci-fi that I really want to be watching at the moment, because none of it appeals to me. Like, Altered Carbon I would give a go to, but I don't know, I'm not sure. Actually, I'm really behind the pace on this, but I've just started watching Mandalorian on the Disney Plus thing, because it just got released in the UK, and I didn't want to illegally stream it. I couldn't be arsed with that. And so far, I'm quite liking it. It's got a plot line, and this is an example. So it's got an overarching plot line. There's a bounty hunter, and you know, he doesn't say a lot. He's quite a bland character. I'm fine with that. And he goes to a different planet, and guess what? He has to overcome an obstacle on that particular planet. And he meets a new character that's really likable. Some sort of weird mustache man that sort of ends every sentence he says with something along the lines of, what does he say? I've said it so, or something like that. And, you know, he's just a quirky little character on the planet that's got a stupid little one-liner, and you go, oh, that's kind of cute. And then at the end of the episode, he invites him on the ship, and says something to the effect of, obviously the Mandalorian man doesn't say a whole lot. And he asks this weird mustached alien thing to join his crew, probably because he just likes him. He obviously doesn't like many people, and he likes the weird alien man from the planet because he's quite useful. He knows engineering, he's quite wise, and, you know, he's quite intelligent. But the man says no on the basis of the fact that he doesn't want to go with him. He's, you know, already lived a life of servitude, and he just wants to be kept in peace and quiet on his little planet. You know, looking after his weird, ugly, misshapen monster toad tadpole walking things. Fair enough, you know, and then that character's gone, and maybe he'll come up again, but I very much doubt it. And you know what, that's great. There's just a one-off character. Great. Fine. You don't need every character to stick around forever, you know. And if you are going to have characters stick around forever, make them likable. Like, holy shit. I mean, can you remember half the names of the Picard people? Can anyone name half of them? Romulan ninja. A blonde scientist lady that throws up a lot. Man that... Romulan spy that was in the Penny Dreadful series on Sky a while ago, where he played Dr. Frankenstein, and he's more memorable in that, so he's going to be Dr. Frankenstein if I ever mention this again. And what else? I can't remember anyone else. Oh, the captain, who was actually alright. I didn't mind the captain character, although I more enjoyed his holographic, like, butlers. They were more interesting than he was. So yeah, the holograms are more interesting than the actual humans. I'm a hologram racist. But you get what I mean. You know, like, the holograms are more interesting than the human. It shouldn't be like that. The human characters should be the most interesting. Or the humanoid, you know what I mean, characters, not the robots. Unless the robot is specifically written to be that interesting, and not just a side character that turns up for 5 minutes every now and then. Oh, I had to get that out. You know, I'd say I don't understand what it is about sci-fi nowadays. It's, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a little bit more interesting than what it is currently. Because the one thing that sci-fi isn't at the moment is interesting. It's just all rather bland and one-dimensional. And it doesn't have to be bland and one-dimensional. It could actually be really fucking interesting. But it's not fucking interesting. I've realised that from a standpoint of World War II is just taking a complete backseat to my rant about the shittiness of current sci-fi trends throughout this whole episode. So I apologise for anyone that was looking for any World War II action in this episode. But I just had to rant about my hatred of current sci-fi shows. Like, you know, my outlets. Because everyone I know feels the same about this. You know, why... You know, I'd go as far to say that even Discovery, Star Trek Discovery was better than Picard. And Discovery had its problems, but if you just took the name Star Trek out of it, It was alright. It was watchable. I didn't watch Discovery and hate it as I was watching it. Some of the characters were quite fun. I quite liked Saru. I quite like the engineer man who made the spore drive, but I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name. But him, he's quite good. He had like that love interest with that other guy, the doctor. You know, that was fun. I like that storyline with the doctor and him, and the doctor like dying and then coming back and then sort of being, you know, he said, oh, I'm a different person, sort of thing. It was good. You know, it's not great, but at least it was something for the characters. I didn't hate any of the characters. Like even Burnham, the lady that's like been raised by Vulcans. I sort of understood that she wasn't very charismatic because she'd been raised by Vulcans, and hiding emotion was sort of a part of her character. So I even watched that and thought that was fine. I mean, the Klingons look stupid, but you know, superficial, and all the tech didn't make sense with any of the original series stuff. But that's nitpicky. I can avoid all that as long as the storyline isn't shite. And at least like they had the mirror universe in that series, and I was like, yeah, mirror universe up in here, moderately interesting. But other than that, I don't know. It's just not what I wanted. But I'm going to call it an episode here. I've done a 45-minute rant pretty much about the horrors of sci-fi on TV. So I really apologise for this episode. I'm gonna, I think, relocate all my forces out of North Africa, I think, off screen. Reposition them, I think I'm going to try and reposition them out of Singapore, and then move them all to attack Taiwan / the Philippines pretty much as soon as possible. I think that's probably the best thing to do. Maybe we should knock Japan out of the war first, because I always fight Germany, and you know, the Soviets have got a handle on that. You know, we can probably just leave that there for a while. They're dealing with that, and the Americans have got the Italian front locked down. So why don't I do a little bit of concentration on Japan? Maybe try and take Kyushu. Is that Honshu or Choshu? I think that's Honshu. Well, that's Kyushu. I can't remember the name of the main island. And then, you know, maybe try and plan really large-scale naval landing of the Japanese mainland, because that would at least be interesting. So thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the campaign, and I'm sorry, I'm going to like title this the Sci-fi Rant. So if anyone gets sick of it, just feel free to turn it off. I won't blame you. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you stuck through my rant, if anyone is a sci-fi geek out there. So thanks again. Bye bye.